Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Enneagram Story Podcast. I am your host, Braylon Williams. I'm so thankful that you are joining me today as I get the opportunity to sit and have a conversation with Jeanne Stevens. If you're new to the podcast, this podcast is a weekly podcast where I discuss how the Enneagram can be one of the most beneficial tools in helping us become better people. And I want to tell you a little bit about today's show, but before I go there, allow me to tell you about something that's happened in my life recently. At the time that we are recording this episode, which is late January of 2023, I have been blessed with enough money by Evangel University to finish paying off this last semester. It was looking very tough to understand how that was going to be paid because the way we planned things before the semester started just did not turn out. And I was already a week and a half behind on assignments because I didn't have access to my assignments because I didn't pay my bills. So that was a big blessing. But on top of that, I just announced my latest project I'm working on, which is Stage University. And what Stage University is an online video learning platform that will teach vocalists and instrumentalists and public speakers important elements of stage presence and how to connect with the audience and engage the audience in the moment, especially within the church service. So I'm so excited for that. Hopefully that will be released at the end of this summer. Working very hard to get it done, just to see how far that idea has come from concept to where it is now. That progress is astronomical, and I'm so excited for this. I can't wait to share the preview with everyone who wants to be a part of it. So about today's show, like I said, we're going to sit and have a conversation with Jeanne Stevens, and we're going to talk about her newest book, What's Here Now, How to Stop Rehashing the Past and Rehearsing the Future and Start Receiving the Present. But we're also going to talk about being present and the work that it takes to stay present. So let me tell you a little bit about Jeanne. Jeanne Stevens is the founding and co-lead pastor of Soul City Church in Chicago, and it is one of America's fastest growing urban churches. And prior to starting Soul City Church, Jeanne was on the pastoral staff at Willow Creek Community Church and North Point Community Church. And as a sought-after speaker, leader, and writer, Jeanne's passion is to help people wake up to their purpose as they pursue a life of wholehearted freedom. Jeanne lives in Chicago with her husband, Jared, and their 2 children. I could go on to tell you about Jeanne, but why not hear from her herself? So let's jump right into today's episode.
Hi.
Hey, how you
How
doing?
you doing? I'm good. How are you?
Good. Just today, we got some snow in Missouri, so it's been a pretty chill day. Nothing's going on.
Yes.
The roads are.
Same. It's snowing here in Chicago, so.
I don't mind being off of school, but I hate snow.
Where do you go to school?
Evangel University
Okay.
in Springfield is 5 years. I'm so ready to be done.
I bet you are. It's awesome. I'm so grateful that you invited me to be a part of the podcast.
Oh, yes. I thank you for agreeing to it because I am just over the moon. I read your book and I was like, all right, this has got to happen.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad that it was an encouragement to you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm going to talk a little bit more about why I like it so much as we go on. But
Great.
Let's just get to it. Again, thank you for being here.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I have a heart. I don't know how long your show is. How long do you tend to like it to be?
I try to keep it under 45, no more than an hour, really. I've been run over.
Okay.
So an hour to 45
great.
minutes to hours where I try to keep it. So.
Great. Yeah, I have a hard stop in 45 minutes for another meeting.
All right. So we should be, hopefully, there's a lot I want to ask. So if we don't, though, we just have to schedule another time because
there you go.
It's going to be a good time. So
part two.
Part 2. I always continue the conversations. What I like to do. Why stop it? Always continue it.
I love it.
Let's just start off with some simple stuff. Anything exciting happened recently in life for you?
Well, anything exciting happening in our lives? Yes, we just welcomed we have 2 kids. My husband Jarrett and I, we've been married for about 26 years. We have 2 high school kids. Elijah is a junior, Gigi is a freshman, and we just added another high schooler to our
All
family.
right.
Long story short, a kid that needed a home, needed a family, and we
Good.
felt called and compelled by God. And
Oh,
so, yeah, we just became a family of five. And yeah, he's a sophomore and he's a great kid. And so all the adjustments.
oh, yeah, that's very exciting. I love kids. I'm actually a substitute teacher in my free time, so I
Oh,
understand the
cool.
heart for people taking in
Yes.
those who don't have the
Yes.
means to do it themselves. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's it's a heavy burden to take care of kids, but somebody's got to do it. I'm lucky enough. Just a substitute, so I can take care of them and send them back to actual teachers later on.
That's right. That's right.
Don't have to worry about grades or anything. Um,
Yeah.
so what about your Enneagram journey? How did you discover the Enneagram, and what were some of your initial thoughts and feelings about it?
Yeah. Oh man, my Enneagram journey has been a while of a journey. It started a number of years ago. A friend of mine first told me about it, and my friend Doug, and he was like, "Hey, have you heard about this thing called the Enneagram?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" No, and he's like, "It's kind of like a better understanding of all of the different ways in which people see life." He kind of broke it down and explained that it's a bit of a personality assessment, but it's so much more. It's actually a tool to lead people towards transformation once they better understand their type. So I was super curious because I'm a learner and I'm always interested in, most people get interested in the Enneagram because they're curious about their favorite topic, which is themselves.
Oh yeah,
So they want to learn more about themselves. And so I was super curious. And he said, read all of the types, and the one like the downside, like the vice, whichever number you read that vice, you read that shadow side, and you're like, ugh, that's so me, but I don't want anyone to know that that's
yeah.
me. He's like, that's your number.
Oh
He's
yeah.
like, it's better than any assessment you take. So I read about all the nine types. And the first time I read the eight, I was like, yep, there's no doubt about it. I am a challenger.
Oh, that is good. I am an eight too, so I know the heart of eights is like, for me
Yes.
especially, is vulnerability. I've been working on it, but I hate it. It's like and
Yeah.
then also the idea of control, which I'm gonna tell you about something that bugged me with your book about that idea, but we'll get to that later. So but it was a great book and
Yeah.
I loved it,
Yeah.
like I said. And
Mm,
I believe that it was great timing that I found you, because I actually heard of you first on Typology podcast with Ian Morgan Crone.
mm.
That's where I heard you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I was listening to that as I was working one day, and I was like, this is good. Because you said something in there, and you said this in your book too. It was talking about how most of us really aren't here. And you start realizing that you was on the door of exhaustion, tiredness, and you felt
Hmm.
like the work of God was deteriorating the work of God in you. And so when you said that, I was like, one, that is totally me. Like, this is a
Mm.
reflection of my current life. And then the next thing was like, gotta get her on the podcast. So, and here we
Hmm.
are. So it's been I think that was back in the summer when I
Okay.
first heard that. So I was like,
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
very anxious to get you here. And so here we are.
Mm.
And so I'm trying
Oh,
to use the
well,
time
thank
very
you.
wisely.
You know, absolutely. And eights have a notorious way of getting themselves into settings where they exhaust themselves.
Oh, yes.
Eights learn that being weak is dangerous and they can't trust anyone without overwhelming evidence of loyalty. That's one of the descriptors of an eight. And one of the ways that we let our shadow side emerge is that idea of being weak and making it synonymous with weakness is dangerous. I should never be weak. I should never um, pause. And yet it leads us into a life of exhaustion.
Yes.
And And that is not at all what God invited, right? He invited us to live in rhythm, and that actually in our weakness, he's made strong. And so it's been a journey for me of understanding that actually my weakness and my areas of tendency to overwork myself actually are an invitation to pause, to be still, and to be present, because it is the gift of this now moment where we actually get to experience all of the gift of life.
Oh yes. So glad you said that because when I heard you on that podcast, I'm a part of a worship team at Janesville Church out of Ozark, Missouri, and it's a mega church. We have 4 campuses, and I've been doing it 4 years next month. And ever since I've been on the team, I've been every service up there singing. And I was on a sabbatical for the first time in ever during this time when I heard you. And it's like, it's so true because it was during that time when I was doing nothing but going to work, then going back home. And it's like, there's nothing for me to do. But that's when I found the most power when there was nothing on my
Mm,
calendar. It was just me and
yeah,
what was there. So that's a
yeah,
good word.
yeah. Yeah.
So, next thing I want to know is what was pastoral work ministry always your go-to career? Was that like
Mm.
in the back of your brain from a little kid to the time you actually did it, or was there something else that you wanted to do and you just kind of moved into calling it pastoral work?
Mm. Yeah, not at all. I never would have imagined myself in ministry. I grew up uh, really drawn to the performing arts, and so all things musical theater and acting and singing and everything, that kind of went around that realm. And it wasn't until a mentor in my life when I was in high school actually said, "Hey, you know that you're a leader, right?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Yeah, you're a leader. Like, people follow you, and I think that God just might want to do something with that in your life." And it was the first time that I had somebody point out that spiritual gift of leadership in my life, and that it was there for a reason and an intention, that God had given it to me, and that what God deposits, God wants to then see fruit come from it, right?
Yeah.
That there was supposed to be something to come from that gift in my life. And so, yeah, it was not at all what I thought I was going to do or wanted to do, but slowly by surely, I began to really listen to those promptings. I began to put myself in settings where my gifts could get used for ministry, and eventually I was like, wait, I think that guy might be right. I think that mentor might be right. I think that um, all of these experiences have been preparing
Yeah.
me to use these gifts for God's glory in a ministry setting.
So you found all these gifts and you used them, and I suspect as an eight, you just kept on using them. And I correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably what led to that moment of, all right, I've got to learn how to be present. And that was like realizing that you've used all your gifts too much and you need to take out time. Would you say that would be like kind of like that catalyst for you starting the journey of learning presentness?
Yeah, I would say that I have always been a person that is had a full capacity, and so I love to live life to the fullest. And I like the word yes more than I like the word no.
Oh yes,
It
totally.
just feels way better. And so I love to say yes to opportunities, and to believe that more is possible
Oh
in the
yes.
24-hour day that we've been allotted, right? And I think that the process of a regular yes, a diet of yes, without any kind of good restriction, is what led to some burnout and some
Yeah.
exhaustion for me. And I think what I really then began to realize was that you can live a life all the way to the full. I mean, that's the invitation in John 10:10, right? I've come to
Yeah.
give life, and life to the full. life in abundance. But the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And so often that killing, stealing, and destroying, we are covert partners in it, right?
Oh, yes.
By not having any limitations on ourselves and seeing the gift of limitations, by not practicing the Sabbath, by not living in healthy rhythm, by not saying no to things that really are not our best offering back to God. And so, yeah, I just began to realize that I was kind of living on a constant go diet, and it was not of service to me. And living that way then keeps us from the present moment. And I was realizing that I was here, I was going through the motions, but I wasn't really here.
Yes.
I was somewhere else in my mind, right? My body was in the present moment, but my mind and my heart were either rehashing the past or rehearsing the future. They were going over all the things that had happened, or they were anticipating all the things that might happen out
Yeah.
in the future. And it's just not a way to live in presence.
Yeah.
It's a way to miss this now moment. It's a way to miss the people that God's put in our lives, and it's a way to miss being present to ourselves and to God.
Yeah. I don't know what it feels like for you, but for me, like when I am present and I'm like right there, not focused on the future, not even thinking about the past, it almost feels like I'm in a movie. Like it's that sweet
Hmm.
moment of you're in a rose field,
Yeah,
or like your dream moment. It's like
yeah,
it was unreal. Would you say that's the same
yeah.
thing for you too?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something quite powerful about living in the present moment. It doesn't have to be, I mean, it sure is great when it's picturesque like that, right? When it's
Yeah.
idyllic and we can see ourselves in a field of roses, right? Or all is well. But I think the really powerful thing is that you can be present even in the midst of pain. You can
Ooh,
be present in the midst of difficulty. You can, and that's especially the deep hard work, because whenever we're faced with pain, or we're faced with difficulty, or we're faced with a circumstance that maybe we would not have written into our story, it's an opportunity to be with uh, what is instead of what was or the what ifs.
oh yeah.
It's truly consenting to reality, and all of the spiritual life is consenting to what is, being in what is with God. I had a experience last week. I was at a retreat center, and they had some like high ropes courses, and they had this exercise called out on a limb. And it was essentially a log that was 25 feet up in the air. You were belayed into somebody that was down on the ground, but there was no handrail to get across. It was literally just walking that 25 feet in the air across the log, um, truly being out on a limb. And I did it. And boy, if that isn't an exercise for the present moment, I don't know what is. Because I was like, it's not going to be of any service to me if I try to rehash the past or
Oh
rehearse
yeah.
the future. I need to be in this now moment up here on this log, or I am going to fall. And it was so powerful to just step by step by step, be aware of my breath, be aware of the inhale, the exhale, that there was nowhere else to be. There was no other problem to solve. All I had to do was be in that moment with myself and with
Yeah.
God. And it was just such a reminder to me that what's here now um, is such an unlocking question of experiencing the gift of the present moment.
Oh, so good. And I'm trying to think how you can trademark that, because like the log, that's got to be a part of it. You should have put that in the book. That was amazing. I mean, yeah, you think about the future, you think about the past, you're going to fall off that log. So,
That's exactly
so,
true.
but like I said, I love your book for the most part. There's one chapter I didn't really like, but we'll talk about that in a minute. It was still a good chapter.
I,
it called
I
me
love
out too much.
I love
So,
an honest review.
so it was honestly like I try to read 3 chapters of a book within an hour and a half, because that's about as long as I can focus. But your book
Yeah.
one of the books where like I just had to force myself to put it down and not read it all at one time.
Mm,
It was
mm.
that good. I'm like, Bradley, no, you got to put this down. You got to, if you keep reading, you're gonna lose focus. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I want to read the rest of this book
Mm,
tonight. It was just that good.
mm,
And so on page 132, you were talking about how you're part of a group. And I want to read this quote so we can talk about it a little bit. You write, I didn't know any of the other members, and the leader was an acquaintance from many years ago. I felt conflicted about what I wanted from this group. One part of me wanted this group to continue to feed the automatic part of me that wanted to impress and inspire others. But my authentic self was craving real and wanted this group to enfold and hold me just as I was. I was hungry for a circle where there would be no charades, no mask, and no pretending. I wanted the scaffolding holding me together to come down, and I wanted to drink in the nourishment of being known. While I was hoping to experience this kind of vulnerability with the group, I was also aware of the risk and cost associated with it. The risk of not being impressive, the risk of being ordinary, the risk of not being received and loved for who I am. What if they really saw me and didn't want to keep seeing me? What if they thought I
mm,
wasn't smart enough, hadn't accomplished enough, hadn't accrued enough wealth, and didn't offer enough value to the group? That was,
mm,
gosh, probably the most relatable part for me in that book. It was like
mm.
powerful
Yeah.
moment. I
Mm,
just had to sit because it's powerful to see that. And so I want to go
yeah.
deep into that, but let's just start off at the surface level. What is the difference between the automatic self and the authentic self?
Yeah. Yeah, I love your question, and I remember writing that section, and I remember recounting the experience of joining that group where everything in me everything in me wanted to live in my deepest authentic self, but I was so practiced in the automatic self.
Yeah.
I was so practiced in like I write, and I think all humans are, in the charades, in the
Oh,
masks,
yes.
in the being impressive, in the pretending. But we all desire to be seen. And I think I even write later in that chapter, hiding all the time is a terrible way to live. It keeps you from the present and from living as your true, authentic self. And the automatic self, I write about the different cycle. When you're living in the automatic self, in some ways you're looking to receive acceptance through your achievements.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to do something. Hopefully people are going to say well done. They're going to receive me for that achievement, and I'm going to feel significant because of it. It's going to make me feel like I'm important. And then what happens when that starts to wane, when that starts to decrease just ever so slightly, it's like, well, I want to get that feeling back. I want to sustain that feeling of achievement and significance. So how do I sustain that strength so that I feel accepted again?
Yeah.
That's the pathway of the automatic self. It's where the ego gets developed, right? It's where personas get developed. But the beautiful part of the authentic self, the true self, the person that we fully are when we are all the way whole with God, with ourselves, is we actually start from a place of acceptance. We start from a place of not because of anything that I've done, not because of anything that I'm gonna do, not because of the color of my hair or the grades next to my name or the achievements that I have performed in this life, but because of who I am, son, daughter of God, I am accepted. And that acceptance is what I actually find strength from. That's what sustains me. That's what
So good.
fuels me. That's what gives me hope, right? And when I have that sustaining strength, that's where I find my significance. That's where I know this is what I am called to do and to be in this life. And that's where I actually achieve and live on purpose with God. And so it's actually a really beautiful thing to see the reverse cycle. That it starts with acceptance when we live in that cycle of grace from our authentic selves.
Mhm. That is so good.
Mhm.
I, we see people portray characters on the screen all the time, but I think the greatest screenplay we see is just reality. Humans being
Hmm.
different from who they truly are. And I am will
Yeah.
be the first to say I am guilty of that. Like I hide
Yeah.
so much of
Yeah.
my true self because I think either it's not valuable at the moment, or if I show my true self, people will see me as weak because I'm the person who people
Hmm.
come to for advice for a life. I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like I can't be the person who needs advice when I give the advice. And it's that,
Yeah.
again, authentic self and being vulnerable enough to say, hey, we are human beings. First and
Hmm.
foremost, we are childs of the living God, daughters,
Hmm.
sons of Him. And so that's just so well said.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I would say, the interesting thing is that, we all think that what people are drawn to is perfection, but they're
oh,
not.
oh,
What we're actually drawn to is imperfection, because in imperfection, we see authentic vulnerability, and we're more drawn to, "Oh, you're just like me, imperfect, figuring it out, in need of grace." And we're more compelled to step into relationship with somebody that's imperfect versus somebody that presents themselves as perfect.
that's good. But we don't think we are. A lot of times we always think like
Right,
we're
right.
like, we've got to find that perfect person who's no flaws, you know? That
That's
perfect
right.
friend
That's
who
right.
shows
Mhm.
who has everything
Mhm.
together. Keeping up with the Jeffersons,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
Jeffersons, the forget the saying, keeping up with the I forget what it's saying, but it's like you got to keep up with the person who has the most things, who life looks put together the most. So that's good. I never thought of it, but
Yeah.
I like how you said
Yeah.
that. So, like I said, I've been in college for 5 years. February marks my fourth year of being on worship team at James River Church. So I've made different friend groups throughout both college and church, and been with different people. And I get a comment all the time of people saying, Braylon, I don't really know who you are. And if the first
Mm.
time it somebody said it to me, I was like, yes, you do. I am a podcaster. I'm an interior designer. I do this
Mm.
evangel. I'm on worship team at James River. I'm like, how do you not know who I am when I broadcast it all the
Mm.
time? I got to start thinking, I was like, do they really know me? These are just titles. These are
Yeah.
things I like to
Mhm.
do. And so now every time somebody says, I'm like, you know what? You don't know me. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
um, and hopefully one
Yeah.
day you can know me, but you got to work on that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The virtue, so every Enneagram number has a vice and a virtue. And it's who we are in the light and who we are in the dark. And
yeah,
the 8, when they're in the light, are vulnerable and innocent. That's our virtue, innocence. And when I think about innocence, I actually think about just a vulnerable child that is willing to, let themselves fully be seen exactly for who they are. And so anytime an 8 chooses vulnerability, anytime an 8 chooses to let themselves be seen, and to be vulnerable is to let parts of ourselves that we don't
yes.
want to be seen, right? It's is growth for the 8. That is them walking in the light. So you having the right people in your world that can regularly say, Braylon, I'm getting to know more and more of who you are. That's a sign of growth.
Yeah.
That's a sign of transformation.
But a thing for me, and I suspect would be a thing for a lot of other people too, is um, cognitively, I'm like, all right, the cost and risk that you talk about of being known, I'm okay with in my mind. But then
Yeah,
in
of course,
practice,
of
it's
course.
like, oh, nope, nope. Let's go back to just putting on this charade of just being
Right,
this
right. Yeah,
public
yeah,
figure. And so,
yeah.
how do you encourage yourself to stay vulnerable and not to pretend?
Yeah. I think for me, some of that work is, and even in the book, I give this little graph of what it looks like to be in the automatic self, and then what it looks like to be in the authentic self. And I kind of even give descriptions, right? The thoughts, the actions, and the words of the automatic self, and then the thoughts, actions, and words of the authentic self. And so anytime I notice any one of those things, like for example, the the automatic self really is looking to be right. You know,
Yeah.
anytime I'm really looking to be right about something, I'm like, what's going on here? Are you really present in this now moment? Or is there something from the past that you're trying to prove, or something out in the future that you're trying to prove, and you're doing it through righteousness, your own
Ooh,
righteousness, right? You desperately want to be right. So I pay attention to that thought. And action maybe could be anytime I'm feeling overwhelmed, right? That's an indicator to me that I'm not in this now moment. Anxiety, overwhelmedness, obsessing about things in the future. Worry is living in a not yet that's worse than your now. It's the very definition of worry. There's some kind of not yet that hasn't happened yet, but I'm making it even worse in my mind than my now moment,
oh
right?
yeah.
That's usually an indicator to me that I'm not being present. Or then words. Whenever I find myself saying like things like I should or I can't, it's hard, it's not my fault, things like that. Those are all indicators to me of the automatic self that I'm not really here in this now moment. But when I can breathe, when I am experiencing peace, it's like this mistake that occurred is an opportunity for learning. So I'm not looking at it through the lens of shame. I'm not looking through the lens of blame. I'm actually looking through the lens of curiosity and learning. Um, I realize I'm grounded in this now moment. I'm actually receiving the gift of even this mistake that I don't want anyone to know about it. There must be something for me to learn in it. Actions like I'm going to just have appreciation for
Yeah.
others and for what they bring or what they don't bring into my life. Instead of wanting to change them or adjust them or have them be different, I'm going to just bring appreciation into this relationship. Words like, how can I grow? What can I learn? You know, I'm choosing to do this versus I should do this. I try to turn should into I can. Like even something as simple as like I should do the laundry too. I can. I get to do the laundry, and then there's not obligation, right? There's not that force. There's actually healthy responsibility and choosing into this now moment. Those are some little signs of me knowing, okay, I'm really here, and I'm practicing presence.
Ooh, that's good. I might have to steal that laundry one because ooh, when it comes to getting laundry done, I'm the
Nobody
worst
likes to
about
do
it.
it, right?
Like I've got clothes I washed last week still in the basket because I haven't put them away. It's like ugh, I can't put them away. I'm gonna start saying that. Hopefully it'll
Yeah,
get done. So
totally. It's just it's a different way of viewing it, right? It's a totally different lens. Should is you know, it's a feeling of you've done something wrong. I should.
that's
I
good.
uh you know, and there's some condemnation in that. Versus I get to, I choose to. This is a privilege. There's people in the world that don't get to do laundry. I get to do laundry, and I'm going to be a good steward of these things. You know, and it's just
Yeah,
it's a small way to shift a activity that we all do, which is laundry.
that's so good. So good. So, like I said, I like the entire book, but there is one chapter, chapter 10, that I probably say I was not my favorite, probably the least favorite, honestly, because well, when I got to it and I saw the title, which is Waiting and Control Waiting Rooms, I was like, this is going to be a good chapter. Then I start reading, I was like, I don't like this chapter at all. It's
Yep.
calling me out too
Yep.
much. So, like, because I don't like attaching the word hate to a lot of things, but if there's two things I hate the most, it's waiting and not having control over life.
Yep.
Common symptom
Yep.
of aches across the board is, we have to
Yep.
have control. And if we don't, we feel like, again, we're weak or
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
are too invulnerable. Um, and so you talked about a process and there with the releasing and the responding and renewing.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
I should have wrote this down so I could talk about it a little bit here, but kind of talk about that process a little bit. And then, if you would, any advice that you would give for somebody who might be stuck in one of the phases of that process,
Yeah.
because I find myself stuck in
Yeah.
releasing a lot of times where I give it to God, but then I'm like,
Mhm.
I know you can take care of it, but I've got to take it back. So
Mhm. Yeah. 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 I mean, I write in the book that when God invites us to wait, he also invites us to release our will. And it's part of the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. Your will be done.
yeah.
And I'm really good at Jeannie's will be done. I'm
Oh,
really good at saying to God, hey, this is my will. This is what I'd like you to do. Could you just fall in line with this? But that's not what we're taught to pray, right? We're taught to release. And so much of the spiritual life with God is to consent to reality and to surrender. And
oh,
anytime we are clutching, grabbing, forcing, um, wrapping our fingers around this is how life must go, it is almost undoubtedly an invitation that there is something that you are holding on to that needs to be released. Um, and so that first process when it comes to waiting and control is just releasing. And sometimes it's just naming and getting clear on what are the things that I'm holding on to?
mm,
What is in a tight grip right now? And just naming them. You don't even need to start with releasing them. Some of us just need to start with naming them and getting clear and conscious about what is it that I'm holding on to. Um, and then from there is the action of responding. And I use this little quote from Eugene Peterson that says the assumption of spirituality is that always God is doing something before I know it. So the task is not to get God to do something I think needs to be done, but to become aware of what God is doing so that I can respond to it and participate and take delight in it. Now, this is extra hard for the 8 because we like to make things happen.
oh yeah.
But what this step is it's going, God's already at work. God's already at work. My invitation is to join where God is already at work. It's not to make it all happen. It's not to force it all together. It's to respond to where the Holy Spirit is already moving. And then the ongoing regular step of renewing is to just, to allow yourself to have the raw, real, and honest confessions of uh, what is working and what isn't working. You know, God wants us to come as we are, not come polished and perfect and all put together. And so much of the process of renewal, we have to be able to bring the fullness of ourselves so that God can renew us. And so, yeah, I write about how those three really work with one another.
Yeah. And I like when I read that, it was kind of hard to understand first when I read it. I had to read it, had to go back and think about it because I think the reason why it was hard to understand is because I just don't like giving up control. So I was like, you know what? Maybe
Yeah,
I understand what it's saying. I just don't want to accept it. And that's what this entire
yeah,
chapter was for me. It's like I understood everything,
yeah.
but like Braylon just did not want to accept it because it was so true.
Hmm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. And I think the reason that I called it waiting and control is because anytime we're holding on to control, God's most consistent methods to help us release that control is to invite us to wait. It's all throughout the scriptures, right? David talked about waiting on the Lord over and over and over again. And spiritual waiting is not a lack of activity. In fact, spiritual waiting is one of the most active things that occurs. But it's hard for those of us that are generators of
oh yeah.
motion, right?
Yeah, we have this mentality as eights, get it done. And if we have to
Hmm.
wait, it's like, why wait when I know I have the full capabilities
That's
of doing
right.
it myself? You know,
That's
I
right.
can
That's
work
right.
something out to make the money come in. I can take another job. I can do
Yeah.
this. Or
Yeah.
I can
Hmm.
make more time in the schedule to have more social things
Right.
with my
Right.
friends. It's
Yeah. And productivity isn't bad. Productivity is good, right? It's taking this one precious life and
yeah,
living it to the fullest. But it is also when we use that as a way to avoid participating in what
Yeah.
God is really inviting us to do.
And I
That's what we
think
have to
that's
pay
a
attention to.
I think that's a key point where, like you said, we have to pay attention to that. It's like, are we using our productivity to actually be productive, or are we using it to avoid life and avoid
Yeah.
presentness? So that's a good word. Um,
Mm.
so I kind of skipped ahead in my notes a little bit, but I want to go back to what um some scripture, your go-to scripture. You talked about one that invites you to be present, but do you have more scripture that invites you to be present?
Mm. Yeah. I often will go to Proverbs 3 because it's an active opportunity to trust in the Lord with all your heart. And, the questions around what's here now are what am I sensing in my body? What am I feeling in my heart? What am I thinking in my mind? And when I ask myself those questions, I pay attention to the answers. It pulls me back into this now moment. And the reason I like to use trust in the Lord with all your heart, don't lean on your own understanding, but in all of your ways, acknowledge Him and He'll direct your steps. It really does also walk you through the question, what's here now, right?
Yeah,
Trust in the Lord with all your heart. What's going on in my heart? Like, is my heart afraid? Am I feeling fear? Am I feeling nervous? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling excited? Am I feeling hopeful? Right? What's here in my heart? Don't lean on your own understanding. Right? That's all about your mind. What are you thinking? What are you processing? What are you
yeah,
rolling over again and again and again? What conversation did you have with somebody last week that you're still replaying? Right? Or that happened not just last week, but last year or 2 years ago. Right? And so, what's your mind doing from a like understanding perspective, and how can you have God renew your mind? Right? The scriptures talk about renewing our minds, and so how can I not just come to whatever it is that I'm contemplating with my understanding, but God, give me your understanding, and you will direct my steps. And from there, it's like, what am I sensing in my body? Where is God calling me to move? Where is God calling me to participate in his movement in my life? And so that's a go-to passage for me that I love to come back to, especially because somebody just like you that struggles with control, trust is the letting go of
yes,
control. Um, just like when I walked across that log, that story I shared earlier, it was a real trust that I can do this. I'm going to trust one that I'm belayed into somebody else, and so if I fall from 25 feet, they will step in. But I'm going to trust that if I go slowly, if all I do is concentrate on my steps, one in front of the other, that I have what is needed to move forward. Um, faith is being hopeful of what we cannot see. Trust is being hopeful of what we cannot see. And most of us, we like insurance instead of assurance.
oh yes,
But when we live in assurance, we're walking in trust that God sees all that we don't see, and is for us and is with us and is guiding us step by step.
oh that's so good. Insurance versus assurance. I'm gonna start using that. That I like that. Don't get insurance, get assurance. That should be
That's
like
right.
Geico's new
That's right.
line. Save
There
15%
you
more on
go.
insurance. So, well, we're kind of getting close to time. So, we talked about a lot already. But what I want to know is there anything that we have not talked about that you want to talk about?
Yeah, thanks so much. I just would invite anyone that's listening um, to be reminded that it is possible to be present. It is possible. We have so many things that are vying for our attention. And probably one of the biggest is these little
Oh,
gadgets.
yes.
I'm holding up my cell phone, right? And I think that so many of us let those phones be the boss of us instead of us being the boss of our phones.
Say it again.
You can your phone is not your boss. You are the boss of your phone. You are the boss of your time. You are the boss of what you let in. And learning how to live in presence is possible, but it takes practice. The spiritual life that we're invited into is a praxis life. We are to practice being in the presence of God. And the beautiful thing about God's presence is that it's always available.
Oh
There's
yes.
no like special place that we need to go to. There's no special thing that we need to conjure God's presence. God's presence is always available. We're just the ones that aren't always available to God's presence.
Oh yeah.
And I would say to anyone that's listening, uh, God is wherever you are. He is with you and for you. And oftentimes you're the one that's not there and being present. And so I would encourage you to pause, to rest, to just ask yourself that question: what's here now? What am I feeling in my heart? What am I thinking in my mind? What am I sensing in my body? And those three questions are an invitation to return to this now moment. It's an invitation to experience peace. We cannot experience the peace of God without practicing the presence of God. And I don't know a person that isn't looking for some more peace in their life. I think all of us
Oh yeah.
want some more peace, and
Especially
it
those
is
nines out there.
possible. Yep, right?
So
Absolutely.
um
Yeah.
this has been great. I know we're getting close to time. So I'm definitely going to figure out more questions to put together because we're going to have to do this again someday. So I'm definitely
Mm,
going to be working real hard on that soon. But just kind of some rapid fire questions that I want to ask you before we go. What the first one is, what does the Enneagram mean to you?
mm. Yeah. The Enneagram, to me, I said it earlier, it's a tool for transformation. It's a tool to better understand myself, to better understand the people that God's put in my life, and it's a tool for growth. It's not a tool to just go, well, I'm an 8, so you just better deal with the fact that I like control. It's an opportunity actually for me to transform and to pay attention to how might control shift in my life.
Oh, that's so good. That's the entire tagline of my podcast. At the end of every episode, I say the Enneagram does not define you, but it brings restoration. It helps reshape your thinking
Yeah.
and habits. So that is just, I like that. And that's the reason why I
Yeah.
started this podcast, because when I discovered the Enneagram, it was that thing of people saying, all right, this is who I am, just deal with it. I'm like, I don't think that's what
Yeah.
it is. So um,
No, no.
the next question, if you go back in time, what would you tell the younger you?
Mm, that's a great question. I would say it's all going to be okay.
Ooh,
It's going to be okay. You're okay. God's at work. Um, yeah. Enjoy. Enjoy the ride, even the pain. Even the pain is here to teach you and to grow you and to transform you.
that's a word right there. Pain transforms.
Mhm.
Next sermon. There you go.
Well, I would just say, I ask people, tell me about the most transforming seasons or moments of your life. Do you know what people always talk about?
What
Painful
is it?
moments.
Hmm.
They talk about painful moments. It's a ripe curriculum where we are our eyes and our ears and our hearts are wide open to God. What are you doing?
It's true because I mean, even looking in the Bible to David when he was hidden in the cave all those years trying
Hmm.
to not be killed by King Saul, he was
Yeah,
transformed by that, and look how he came out.
yeah,
Job, the
absolutely,
greatest example,
absolutely,
lost everything
totally,
and got
totally.
7 times more what he had. So,
That's
um,
right. That's right.
one thing you hope to accomplish in the next 3 months.
Mm. I'm starting to work on my next book proposal, so I'm hoping to get that done.
All right. So that's a big goal. I don't know what that's like at all because I've published some journals, but I've done it self-published, so it's been a little bit easier. So I heard that book publishing proposals are can be a pain though. So I'll be praying for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, and last question, because I've been binge watching a lot of TV shows lately. What is a binge worthy TV series you've been watching?
My husband and I just started one called The Rest of Us.
Oh,
It's very interesting. It's called The Rest of Us, and basically there's kind of like a interesting pandemic that very different from the one that we all just walked through with COVID. Um, that ends up destroying so many lives, and yet there's a handful of people that survived, and how do they live through this thing? So it's a really interesting show.
I'm gonna have to check it out. Is it Netflix?
I think it's Netflix.
Netflix. Okay, I'm gonna check it out. I think I've heard of it, but check it out. Be sure. I'm
Yeah, it
always
just
into
started.
new shows. I
Yeah.
My favorite show recently has been Abbott Elementary. So it's
Oh, I've heard about that. I'll have to watch that.
to me, it's I've never really watched a lot of The Office, but it seems like a elementary school version of The Office. So
Okay.
it's
Okay,
very
that's great.
funny. So,
That's
um,
awesome. That's great.
well, I think that's all the time we have, all the things we've had time for today. So, like I said, though, we had to schedule another one because this was good. A lot of good
Mm,
stuff said.
thank
So,
you. Thank you. It's such a joy to be on the show, and thanks for asking me.
thank you for being here. Well, again, thank you for joining us for today's conversation. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I again want to say thank you to Jeanne for having the time to sit down with me and have this conversation. It's a very important conversation. And I hope that everybody who's listening or watching this podcast on YouTube will glean some tip or some idea to take away and to implement into your life as you learn how to stay present. Because one thing I've learned since I've been on this journey of staying present is that's the most benefit. We we tend to go we tend to have so much anxiety for the future and so much anxiety for everything. But I've learned that all my problems become more the solutions to my problem become more visible when I just stay present. It's not about how can I work the problem out, but it's what's here now. As I answer that question for myself, I've learned that my solutions to my problems become more visible. But I also want to encourage you before we end this episode to get a copy of her book because if you have not read it, it is a powerful book. It's a very relatable book, and you need to get it now. Again, if you have not read What's Here Now, How to Stop Rehashing the Past and Rehearsing the Future and Start Receiving the Present, you need to grab a copy now. I am going to put a link to purchase it from Amazon in the show notes, but you can find it at Barnes and Noble, I think Walmart. It's pretty much in every place where books are sold. You need this book. It is life changing. You need to read it now. It doesn't cost that much, so click the link in the show notes and buy it from Amazon today. So it comes in within the next couple of days, so you can start reading. It is a very powerful book. But I'm also going to put a link to Jeanne's website and her Instagram in the show notes. Be sure to check out her website and follow her on Instagram. Again, thank you for listening. Also, don't miss next week's episode. We're still taking a break from the 27 subtype series. And next week, we're going to talk about the harmonic groups of the Enneagram, in which the harmonic groups is how each type handles conflict. So you don't want to miss that. It's going to be an all-encompassing episode because we're going to talk about what the harmonic group is to begin with. And then we're also going to talk about each of the 9 types within the harmonic group and how that splits and how that works out and how each type handles conflicts differently. Also, don't forget to follow and subscribe to Enneagram Start Podcast on Instagram, Apple Podcast, Spotify. And if you listen to this podcast on Apple, please leave a review, rate and review, because when you do that, it helps the discoverability of this podcast. I appreciate you guys so much for listening and joining in. And as always, if you know this, you can say along with me because I've been saying this since episode 1 of this podcast back in March 2021. It's the way I've been closing out the podcast, and I will continue to close it out this way. I want you to remember that the Enneagram doesn't define you, but it does bring restoration. It helps reshape your thinking and habits.